Hey, it's Josh Arras here with REI BlackBook, and today I've got an interview for you with Don Costa from Flip Talk Radio. And we brought Don on to talk to you about some lessons that he's learned from sending almost 2 million postcards in just the last couple of years. So obviously he sends a ton of postcards, which means he's got a ton of data and a ton of insights on what's working right now and what isn't. And I was actually pretty shocked on some of the things that he had to say. You know, there's a lot of kind of blanket advice that people give out there with direct mail, but they don't have a lot of data to back it up. In the interview, Don actually refers to himself as a mad scientist because he creates all of these different split tests. And what's awesome is in the interview, he talks about some of the results of some of these tests. And he talks about things like everybody says you should be mailing every 30 days. And he knows that in the markets he's in, and he's in different markets all across the country, that certain lists you only really need to mail to every 60 or 90 days, which means you don't have to spend as much money on marketing to get the same results. He also is crazy about tracking his leads. And so we go in and he talks about how he thinks about managing direct mail at scale. And he also talks about, what you should do if you're brand new and you only have $1,000 to spend on direct mail. So whether you're just getting started and you're looking to launch your first direct mail campaign, or you're a seasoned veteran and you're looking to scale up and you want to send 20, 30, 40, 50,000 postcards a month, this interview is going to help you out. And if you're new to the channel, make sure that you subscribe and hit the bell icon, because every week we're releasing new videos to help you grow your real estate investing business. So with that said, let's get into the interview. All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome to this special interview with my guest, Don Costa from Flip Talk. Don, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, man. Thank you so much for agreeing to hop on with us. I wanted to run through kind of a quick introduction, and I've got some questions here, but really the purpose of this, or the reason that I wanted to jump on, was because a couple, I guess it was maybe a month or two ago now, you were in our office and we were chatting, and you kind of just casually mentioned that in the last year or two, you sent something like 1 million or 2 million postcards out. And I was like, hold on a second. I got some questions for you. Anybody that's sending out that much volume, I think the data that you're getting back and the system that you must have in place to be able to handle that much volume, is probably really impressive. And I think that there's a lot that somebody who's at a smaller scale can learn from somebody that is at such a large scale. And right. So, my first question for you is how did you get to the point where you're able to send, 1 million or 2 million postcards out in the course of a year?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I actually had a buddy of mine at one point ask me how I got the guts. I think you used a different word than that, but how I got the guts to do that. And to be honest with you, I didn't intend. So in 2018 was the first year I did massive scale. We did 1.2 million postcards that year. I didn't intend necessarily to do that many postcards in that year. When I started, I think it was just a matter of the evolution of the year. And part of that was I was putting some systems and processes in place. I was putting some new team members in place, and I was really starting to track data at a level that I hadn't really done before. I mean, I was like super hyper tracking the data, and we'll get into that in this conversation. And as the information came back in, and I was able to see the key performance indicators, right? KPIs people refer to all the time in this industry. For somebody who's brand new, they're the lifeblood of your business if you're running a real business. When I was able to see that information, it allowed me to make decisions on how and where to pour fuel on the fire that caused that evolution into 1.2 million postcards that year. To be honest with you, January 2018, I think I sent out 30,000 pieces, which was, I'd done mailings that big before. I just can't say that I did them super, super consistently. I was probably in the 2 to maybe 300,000 pieces range per year up until that point. But I hadn't, like I said, I hadn't had the systems in place to really see the results and the data and the information on the list and different things that I was doing. And so that's how it evolved, honestly, was just knowing my numbers.
Awesome. So at that scale, even sending 300,000 postcards out and 30,000 postcards a month, to know your numbers, what does that system really look like? And are you at this scale? Are you in multiple markets, I would assume?
Yeah. So the first thing is you have to have a good CRM. If you're going to market at any scale, you have to have an absolute good CRM in place, to handle the incoming calls, to make sure that you are tagging things and setting the appropriate follow-up, to make sure that you have the proper notes, you're having good conversations. Obviously, that's a no-brainer, but also as a business owner to be able to see your information, to see your results and your data. Up until that point, we were kind of haphazard. I hate to say it that way, but a lot of my business was built on, networking. I started broke. So a lot of my business was built on networking. I was getting a lot of fall on my lap deals consistently. And so my marketing was a little bit haphazard, and a lot of it was gut. I would send stuff out. We'd get calls, we'd get deals. It felt good. We'd send more stuff out. And so that was the evolution right around that point where we got serious about CRM and numbers, and I got the right people around me in my circle that just really kind of hammered that stuff into me. And so we started really pushing for the data and the results. I don't remember the rest of that question, but I think I may have hit it.
Yeah. The other part of the question, sorry, it was a two-parter, are you to get to that scale? Are you in multiple markets? Got it.
Okay. So yes and no. So yes, we were in multiple markets, but no, in the sense that it was all the state of California, and the state of California is a huge state. So if you count the markets I was in at that point, you'd say 8 markets, but really it was about 3 hours south-ish and about 3 hours north. So about a 6-hour radius in multiple counties.
Awesome. Yeah. And part of that conversation we had when you were in our office, which I thought was awesome, was just, you kind of went through and explained your mentality and your process of, just managing your campaigns. So, you talked about the importance of tracking your leads, and this is important like if you want to go from 500 postcards to 5,000 to 10,000, you still have to know your numbers. If you're spending $1, how much is that dollar returning you? And so what does your process look like when let's say you're going to launch a new direct mail campaign? What does that process look like at a high level so you can make sure that you're tracking those leads as they come in?
So I am, I want to say almost like a crazy scientist when it came to tracking. Like the level we tracked at, I would recommend anybody tracks their marketing at the level we tracked at, but if you don't have it in you, don't feel like you can't market if you don't. I want to have that disclaimer. The marketing that works is the marketing that you do, hands down, period. And so you must take action. But with that said, I got this wild hair, and I was like, okay, if I change the list, or if I change the postcard, or if it's a different quarter, I'm changing the phone number. And so I wanted to really see the data. Like, for instance, we're in a sunshine state, and I got this wild hair to separate 100% equity, and I did like 40 to 99% equity was one of the ranges I picked. And I messed with the ranges of equity from 30 to 99%, 20 to 99%. But anyway, I separated out 100% equity, and that was its own list with its own phone number, its own postcard, and we tracked that data. And then I sent out 40 to 99% equity with its own phone number. And I did that with everything I did. If I changed the color of the postcard, if it was a Street View, Google Street View postcard, which some people are familiar with, they had their own phone number. If it was Q1, Q2, Q3, so on and so forth. And I was able to see a lot of things. Like, for instance, 100% equity doesn't convert that well in California. We're a sunshine state. Unless you have a real big problem with your tenant, you're probably not going to call me. Whereas, and it got me to start thinking like outside the box. Like, if I was going to mail 100% equity, where would I do that at? Right. I would do that in a state where it snows or it freezes in the middle of the season when it's snowing or freezing because if a boiler goes out or a pipe breaks or there's an issue with that property that's not just the tenant and the landlord's over it and done with it because they're sick of fixing stuff. 9 times out of 10, you're going to have a better result on mailing to 100% equity during that season. And that's where I would spend the money deploying that for that particular list, if that makes sense. So, and I started to see these things. I started seeing cycles like in California, for whatever reason, July and August are horrible for direct mail. Now, my hypothesis, which is just my thought, is people are going camping, they're going to the lake, they're getting ready to go back to school. So their priority in selling is not the same as it would be, say coming out of the holidays when they have bills to pay. So I started to see these trends and these lists I didn't want to mail to, and these lists that were more profitable than other lists. And some lists I call high hanging fruit lists. They're lists where you mail to and you get calls, but it takes some follow up and the sales cycle's a lot longer. Some lists are low hanging fruit lists and you get calls and they pop with contracts right away. And I started to see these these trends in data by separating and micro tracking these, these phone numbers out. And it really, just like I said, it really gave me perspective on like where to throw fuel on the fire. Where not to throw fuel on the fire, what lists I should be spending my energy on, what lists I shouldn't be spending my energy on, what list am I mailing to too often where I'm just burning through my profits because I'm hitting it every 30 days and I should be hitting it every 3 months. There are some lists that, you should not mail to more than every 3 months. You're just throwing money away. There's some lists where you want to stay, like if it's a distress list, it's default, a tax default sale. I'm not sure, if you're listening to this, some states are tax default and some states are not. And tax default states, they go to auction. Foreclosures obviously go to auction. Those are ones you're going to want to mail to every 30 days if you're mailing a distress list because you want to be front of mind. And so you start to see these things in your data coming back, and it's really empowering in how you deploy your marketing based on your list and the results you want.
Wow, that's amazing. A couple of things there that I think are really important to unpack a little bit. And one of them was like your testing process. And you started off kind of saying you're like a mad scientist.
Right.
And you never know. People can speculate, and it seems like a lot of times, people will speculate about what marketing is going to work and what marketing is not going to work. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have the system in place and the process in place to track those speculations, or as we probably say, a hypothesis, right? So when you're going to test the new marketing campaign, a lot of times it would make sense to have you go into it with an hypothesis, like you said. I think this is going to work, but I'm going to test it out and make sure. And it can be literally as simple with direct mail as just getting a new phone number and putting that phone number on that postcard, and you're only using that phone number on that one postcard, or maybe that postcard campaign, right? And so to your point, it depends how crazy you want to get. Like, let's say you're going to send 8 postcards to this one list over the course of however many months. Sure, you could put 8 different phone numbers on 8 different postcards to see if postcard 5 converts better. Or you could just use one phone number across those 8 postcards. But either way, it can be as simple as just literally getting a different phone number and putting it on that postcard. By the way, how many probably don't know because you probably have so many, but how many phone numbers do you have?
Oh, we have well over 100, probably close to 200 at this point in time. So we do. I will admit we do recycle after a certain point of time. After about 2 years, we'll recycle numbers. We have reused a few of them. From like 2018 we're using now on new campaigns, but ultimately we try to stick with them for at least a couple of years, because it's funny how many people hold on to your cards for a long period of time and then call in, and that data is still important. Look, the reason why it's important, for instance, and not going by your gut, is in January 2018, I mailed to 2 lists. I mailed to an equity list and I mailed to an unknown equity list. And if anybody is listening to this, an unknown equity list is just basically like, for whatever reason, they don't have information on what the equity is. It's a popular list. It does produce, and that's the gold nugget I'll just hand you. But ultimately, I mailed to those 2 lists, and I felt like the list truly the list we were kind of buying off of right away was the equity list, the unknown equity list. We were getting some stuff. We weren't getting some stuff right away, and so I didn't mail to it again. And if I hadn't been tracking my data, I wouldn't have saw this. And then in June of 2018, we got 30 contracts that month. I think we got like the 26th the month before, and in May, and then we had a handful in March, April that, so you don't have to be smart to do this business. I don't even know what months, but in April, we had a handful of contracts that came in from the unknown equity list as well. So basically June, almost all the contracts are the unknown equity list. May, most of them were the unknown equity list, and part of April were the unknown equity list. And it's funny because I thought that list wasn't going to work. And what happened was it was a high hanging fruit list. And so it was
a what? Sorry.
High hanging fruit list. Okay. It took longer to come in. It was my most profitable list that year by far. But had I went off my gut, I would have thought that because I was continuing to mailing to different distress lists and different equity lists. And I would have thought all the contracts that came in April, May, and June were from the stuff I was currently mailing to. Had I been using one phone number and not tracking things differently, I would have thought it was what I was currently mailing to, because that's what we think, right? But it wasn't. When I looked at the data and what phone number they came from, it was a combination of follow-up, in the system, following up with phone calls, following up on appointments we had and new phone calls. And they were almost all those contracts were the stuff that I had mailed to in January. And I just want to reinforce, had I not been tracking that, I would have thought it was fresh mailings and I never would have realized that list was so valuable to me.
So literally from the piece in January.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I got almost 60 contracts, a little over 60 contracts between April, May, and June from the mailing I did in January.
Wow. Do you get as granular if you're going to send to the same list and, like every 60 days, do you get as granular to break those, break it out a unique phone number on each one of those postcards, or is it by campaign? We do
now. We do by quarter. So if I'm going to do a 40 to 99% non-owner occupied, it's going to be 40-99 NOO Q1 2019. And that's how the split test is going to be labeled. And then it's going to be Q2 2019. And then we're going to know how many times we obviously hit that list. And I'm going to tell you right now, like the whole, it takes 6 or 7 touches. Like I just, my firm belief based in my data is that's garbage. It's not a matter of it takes so many touches. It's a matter of, are you consistent enough to when they're ready to see your message is in front of them. That's what it is. Just because I mailed you 7 times doesn't make you say, aha, I want to sell my house. It's I mailed you consistent enough to, hey, I need to sell my house today. Oh, I got this postcard like a week ago.
Yeah. There's a caveat that people don't usually include when they reference those kind of stats, that there has to be some underlying motivation. Right. You're never going to, no matter how good of a salesman you are, you're never going to convince someone to sell their house at a massive discount. Just because, you're full of charisma and you're a great salesperson. You have to find them at the right time. Right. And unfortunately, you can't really control that. The only thing you can control is whether or not you're there and they remember you. And, sometimes you just get crazy lucky and you send a direct mail piece, your first direct mail, and you hit them at that right time.
100%.
And so there's some luck in this, but you can't really, I guess you can engineer luck if you want to call it that, by just making sure that you're there as much as you possibly can be. And the same is true with follow-up, right? So once you do talk to them, it's the same deal. You still have to follow up with them because they're not all going to be ready to sell right then and there. In fact, the majority of people probably won't. So what is your guys, kind of lead intake process look like? I assume you probably have a team of folks that help answer the phones when people call in. Are you answering calls live?
We answer calls live. I think it's very important that when you do marketing that you answer phones live, that you try, depending on where you're at in your business, do what you got to do. If you have a job, hire a service or send it to voicemail. Do what you have to do to take action. I always want to put that disclaimer. But when you get to the point where you can answer live, I think hands down, you want to avoid sending a voicemail and you want to avoid sending to a service. You want to have either a VA that's on your team answering for you, or you want to have somebody internally. So for a number of years, our team, we had 5 lead managers internally and we had 8 acquisitions managers, boots on the ground. We transitioned to closing over the phone. So now we have 3 internal acquisitions managers that close over the phone. And then we have 3 VAs that are lead managers. So we've morphed a little bit in our organization just to try to streamline our ability to do things and do things more virtually. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the team is the front end team is 3 VAs that are lead managers doing follow-up, answering the calls, and then 3 acquisitions people. So.
Nice. And so with that, so what it would look like is, let's say I get your postcard, I call in, I'm probably going to talk to one of your lead managers first, and they're going to kind of pre-qualify and screen me, right? And then they kind of set an appointment for an acquisition manager. Is that how it works?
They'll set an appointment for the acquisition manager to call back, or they'll do a warm handoff depending on how hot or cold the lead is. Yeah. So ultimately that's exactly how it works. And then if something's not ready for an appointment right away, or if the appointment doesn't convert, then the lead managers are responsible for continuing to do follow-up with those leads. Because follow-up is where you make your money. That's how you make a marketing channel to work at high scale. You cannot market in, whether you're doing cold calling or direct mail or anything else, you cannot market at a high level and not have follow-up in your business and make money. It's impossible. You have to have a strong follow-up game.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I know we're talking about direct mail and lead generation right now, but and that is, I wrote in my notes before we hopped on, I was watching some of your videos, And, you in a couple of your videos, I saw you talk about like, hey, I'm not here to talk about the sexy, shiny object stuff. I'm here to teach you the fundamentals. And I think that while it is exciting and fun to talk about the newest lead generation strategy and what's working great, how can I get, cheap leads or free leads? And that stuff works great on YouTube because that's what people want to know. But, the fundamentals is consistent marketing on the front end and then consistent follow-up on the back end. And I'm glad you brought that up because that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, kind of rough numbers ballpark, would you say the majority of your leads, or how many leads do you guys get from follow-up compared to just people that are, ready to go, set an appointment, get a property under contract?
90%, 80 to 90% of what you do in a business, no matter what your marketing source is going to be some kind of follow-up. Very rarely is the first call going to be, yes, I want to make an appointment. And that first appointment going to be, yes, I want to sell my house. There's going to be some degree of follow-up either on the getting the appointment set, or there's going to be some follow-up from the acquisitions rep to get the appointment, get the appointment converted to a contract. So follow-up needs to be a component to your operation at every level. But the other thing to consider is we're buying stuff like right now with COVID, we're buying stuff that has been in our system for 2 or 3 years where the seller still hasn't sold. Their number hasn't changed, but the market's changed and the comp has changed, and now it's a deal. And so, we're converting stuff that's been in our system 2 or 3 years that are deals now because the market is on fire and the comp has changed. And suddenly there's either a buyer for it if we're going to wholesale it, or it works for us as a flip. So just from that component of it, follow-up is important. But ultimately, depending on the list and the marketing source, you're looking at anywhere from, 4 conversations to, 90 days in the system before something converts to a contract on average. So it just depends on, again, the list and the particular marketing channel. But I would say 2 to 3 months on average. And if you look at any marketing channel you do, when you start, you want to give it anywhere from a 3 to a 4 month runway, whether it's direct mail or cold call or anything you do. You want to give it a 3 to 4 month runway just to allow it to be successful. And if you don't have that in your budget, then you need to find another marketing option or readjust your budget.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, I think there's too many people that are, they've got $1,000 to spend on direct mail, and it's like, this campaign better work. And everybody starts somewhere. And so, to your point, Don, I think that as you're generating leads, you really have to, especially when you're getting started out, or if you're at a smaller scale, you really have to do everything in your power to get the most return from that marketing spend. And that's going to be, following up with every single lead as long as you can, especially early on, until they tell you, take me off your list, or they sell their house. And some of this can be automated, right? You can use automated follow-up. And there's different types of follow-up. There's manual follow-up because somebody, has expressed interest, and you set a reminder in your CRM to call them next Tuesday because that's when they said they'll be available. And that's a more manual, high touch type of follow-up. And that's really more, just sales, right? That's just sales follow-up. And then there's a lot of follow-up that, we here at REI BlackBook talk about, and you hear a lot of other people talking about this more kind of long-term nurture, more automated follow-up. And I think a lot of people get mixed up with that, thinking that that's going to necessarily solve all their problems. And yes, this automated follow-up is great, but the whole purpose of it, and we preach it all the time and we love it, but the whole purpose of it is to just re-engage them and get them back into conversation, so you can start having more sales conversations. Because, let's say you're generating 100 leads a month. Well, that compounds over time, right? And there literally are, you mentioned how you're buying houses, you're buying properties that have been in your CRM for 2-3 years. First of all, if you don't have a CRM, if you're just managing this stuff from a spreadsheet or, notepads, or, if you don't have a system for managing these leads, you're not gonna be able to take advantage of all of the compounding growth in all of these leads that you've generated in the past, because there's gold sitting in your CRM, in your past leads, wherever they are. Hopefully they're in a CRM, because things change. The economy changes, motivations change, And similar to sending direct mail, if you're sending automated text messages or emails or ringless voicemails to people that, requested an offer on their property but didn't want to sell 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 18 months ago, things change. You haven't heard from them for 18 months and they respond to a text message. Now you're back in and now you're having a sales conversation with people. And this is the difference between investors that struggle to make a marketing channel work and investors like Don that, are able to confidently go out and spend and send 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 postcards a month because he knows that he's sending these leads into a machine. Mm-hmm. And him and his team and his systems are going to do the very best to their ability to get the return out of that investment. I can assure you, if you're spending, $500,000 a year or whatever you're spending on direct mail, that you've got, that you're sending those leads into an airtight system because there's a lot of leakage, especially at that scale. You can lose a lot of money if you're not keeping track of those leads and you're not ensuring that they're all being followed up with.
Yeah, that 100%. You said something in there that caught me. I always talk about building momentum, but you actually said it better and you said compounding growth, right? And that's where a lot of people, they don't realize, like, you send out a batch, maybe you send out a batch of mailers and you get a few phone calls, you don't get a deal. And you're like, well, it didn't work. And that's the mistake, right? You send out batch one, maybe you get a few phone calls, they become follow-up phone calls. You send out batch two, you get a few phone calls, and maybe one of them pops in a contract. And then you send out batch three and you start having conversations with them. And then you maybe get 2 contracts from batch one. And this momentum builds, the compounding growth builds over time. And people, like I said, people make the mistake of thinking it's the marketing I'm doing today is the reason why my business is so successful. And it's a lot of the marketing we're doing today is for business 1 month from now, 2 months from now, 6 months from now. And people don't realize that. And as that compounds, as that builds momentum over time, you start to see a real business develop. And you start to see real results develop, and people will wonder, well, how are you doing 10, 20, 30 contracts a month? It's because I've been consistent in building my momentum and compounding it over time to get to where I'm at today. It didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen because I sent out one batch of postcards and I hit the magic list that everybody's trying to sell. It's because I was consistent and I did the fundamentals, the blocking and tackling, and I built the compounding momentum over time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and that really is how you build a business, at least from a marketing and sales perspective. That's how you build a business that consistently and predictably allows you to generate revenue. And the scale at which you build that business is going to be different for everyone. It depends 100%. On your goals, right? You might just want to close 3 deals a month and that would give you everything that you need. And that's fantastic. There's a clear plan to do that. Right. Let's just say you're generating, like I was saying before, 100 leads a month. Month one, you're going to have 100 leads in your CRM, and maybe none of them turn into anything. Month two, you're going to have 200 leads in your CRM. By month 6, you're going to have 600. At that point, you've probably closed a couple deals, and then you could literally, and I wouldn't recommend this, but you could literally, not market for a couple months, and you'd have enough, depending on the lead quality, you'd have enough leads to at least keep you busy for a little bit. Right. I'm of the opinion, and obviously you are, Don, that you always need some sort of fresh blood coming into your system. You always need some sort of fresh leads coming in. Mm-hmm. But you don't necessarily have to spend as much once you get ramped up, the momentum is built. Right. You don't necessarily have to spend as much depending on your goals.
No, I agree. And just, 1.2 million postcards in 2018, 750, just shy of 800 postcards in 800,000 postcards in 2019. I was able to dial it back, but that was more so because I had data now and I could operate off that data and realize I didn't have to deploy as many cards to get the same or better results. So you start to see that. So, and I want to be like, I made the comment about having a 3-month, 4-month runway. And we're talking about, like, if you only have $1,000, there are things you can do, like, driving for dollars and different things you can do where you can be more direct in your deployment. And then you're not blowing that entire $1,000 on one campaign. If you're brand new and you got $1,000 to your name, go drive for dollars, build your list that way, start sending out very targeted direct mail pieces, maybe even pick up the phone and call the sellers too, as a caveat, and get your first deal, and then take some of that profit and redeploy it into more marketing. And maybe now you're starting to do a direct mail campaign where you can build a little more consistency. So I just want to throw that in there. I didn't want to scare anybody that you have to operate at a high level to be successful. When I started, I was broke. The first time I started twice broke. The first time I started broke was in 2003. I started door knocking pre-foreclosures. I got a pre-foreclosure list and I just drove around in my car and I door knocked. I didn't have the money to do a direct mail campaign. They didn't have these fabulous driving for dollar apps or even, really cool CRMs out there to track. So I drove around in my car. Now you could pretty much, drive for dollars on Google, but, I drove around in my car and knocked on doors and did my thing. And I built a business that way. The second time I was $1 million. I had $1 million judgment against me. I was broke as a joke. I'd lost everything because I was a fool. That's a whole different story. And I started networking my butt off with real estate agents and getting deals that way. And then I started, once I got my first deal closed, I invested in marketing and I started building my marketing machine and so on and so forth. So there are ways to start in this business. Just understand that you don't have to eat the whole elephant. Start where you can start with what you have, be smart about it, and so that you have a runway, even that's just, driving for dollars to start and that's it, or whatever else you need to do, and then build the momentum. Just reinvest in your business. The best advice I can give you is you get a $5,000 check, take half of it for yourself, take half of it for your marketing. The next check comes in, take a portion of it for yourself, maybe a little less for marketing if or a little bit more, depending on where you're at, and be disciplined about building your business.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's phenomenal advice. I mean, again, everybody likes to talk about lead generation and especially kind of like the new and shiny and sexy different types of, lead generation that's working. I mean, direct mail has been around forever. And I can't imagine it's going to go anywhere anytime soon. I think it's, Damon always calls it the old workhorse. And, whatever channel you use for marketing to generate traffic and to generate leads, just realize that it's only one piece of the equation, right? You got to, and Don said this many times, you have to point that traffic or push that traffic into a system, into a machine that is built to predictably and consistently turn that traffic into sales appointments and sales appointments into contracts and contracts into deals. Because at the end of the day, traffic and leads is like raw material, right? You have to have a system that can refine that raw material and produce the product that you're looking for, which is at the end of the day, contracts and deals and revenue. And so I think that, sometimes investors set themselves up for failure when they think that there's a magic list that you can mail to, or there's a magic postcard that you can use that's going to bring in deals. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are better lists than others. Yes, there are better postcards than others. But, the fundamentals are it's, consistency. It's find a list that you feel confident in. And there's, Don mentioned a couple, but find a list that you feel confident that will at least generate some leads. There's proven postcards out there that you can find and that you can use. And then, you have to just make sure that the system that you're pushing those leads into is one that's going to help you follow up and turn those leads into deals consistently. And then, one deal turns into two deals turns into four turns into 10, and then you're off to the races.
Right. Exactly. And it's about building that momentum. And yeah.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to come back to, you mentioned, you kind of said it quickly. And I know you've got 100, 150 phone numbers or whatever, but you kind of mentioned your naming convention for your phone numbers, which I think is interesting because that's another thing. If no one's ever, if you're watching this or listening to this and you haven't played around with or experimented with call tracking or just tracking your leads in general, there is a system for doing it in a way that makes it a lot easier to visualize the data and just see, okay, this lead came in. I know exactly when the postcard went out. And the only reason that he knows that is because the way he labels his phone numbers and probably the way that they're tagged when they come into your CRM. So can you talk about that real quick?
Yeah. So, they're labeled a couple different ways, but for purposes of being able to know results. So they're labeled, with identifying the list that it came from, and then of course what postcard we used and when it was sent. So they're split test 1 through whatever. So when we look at the data sheet, it'll say split test, 21, 40 to 99, 40-99, NOO, non-owner occupied. It'll usually say Google or green or whatever. Maybe it's a doodle card, and then it'll say the Q1 2019 or Q2 2019. So it seems a little bit like, okay, I got this long name, but it tells me exactly like 4099. That's 49% equity, NOO, not owner occupied. Google used the Google Street View card in Q1 of 2019.
Yep.
So,
and then when somebody calls in, it's somehow tagged in your CRM that it says, hey, this call came from this phone number. And so then if you run reports to see how many calls we got from, in Q1 of 2019 from our Google postcard, you can go easily find that, right?
Right. You can go easily find that. And so we can see when we sent the card, we can see how many cards we sent, we can see how much we spent on that campaign. So we can do our KPIs. I spent $1, I got $3 back. I mean, there's a lot of things that come from that, from doing it that way that really help you understand your business and your operation and your profitability of that list. So we can see how many dollars came in that were attributed to that list for gross profit. We can see what our net profit was based on how many times we hit that list and spent money, and so on and so forth. It's amazing when you're tracking. Look, it seems crazy, but it just the amount of information you get. And I'm not a data geek. I want to be the first person to say this. I pick up my phone and I do a calculator for basic math. I use spell check religiously, and I'll even use a different word when I can't find the proper spelling for a word, because I'm not going to try to figure it out. So I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and data to me is like drinking bleach. I don't want to do it, but when I see the results, it gives me tingles, because it's like I have so much information at my fingertips. Like I know that this list brought this many phone calls, got this many appointments, this many deals, this many contracts closed, this many fell out. Is this a problem list? Does this list have more attrition than any other list we have? Then why? Do we have problems with titles? Is it a certain type of seller? And so on and so forth. You're seeing like all this crazy data, and then you're seeing what your results were, what money you made. And it's just super, super cool to be able to see that and make decisions based on that. And even now, like I was at a mastermind and I was doing a presentation and I was showing like my top lead gen sources for the last quarter. And it's out of 10, my top 10, 6 of them were follow-up. I closed the most deals. Six of my top, lead gen for the quarter was follow-up, and it was from lists I'd mailed to in like 2018 and 2019. And they were, my team was calling back in, and what they were doing is when the contract would pop is they would put the original list they called in from and on the data. And so I could see that we were buying a ton of deals from stuff we'd mailed to and had in follow for the last 2 or 3 years.
Yep. And that's why it's so important to keep a database, to keep a CRM, because, market conditions change. Mm-hmm. Again, we talked about just overall motivation changes. And that is the perfect example of that compounding effect in action, right? It's, you could, and again, I'm sure you're not going to, but you could just not spend another $1 on marketing for 6 months and you could still close deals. Probably wouldn't hit your goals, but you'd still close deals because you've got a list that you could just go work for months if you wanted to. You
could, but I want to say what I said earlier. You're marketing today for your deals tomorrow. And
exactly. So, so it would dry up. At some point, it would absolutely dry up. So you always want fresh leads coming in the door, and it all depends on your goals. Well, Don, I want to first of all just say thanks for hopping on, man. I think the business that you've built, and specifically the marketing system and the tracking system that you built, is super impressive. I think that if you're watching this and you're just getting started, no, Don was not born, with call tracking, just ingrained into his brain. It's something that he learned. It probably, I would assume, started off, pretty basic. It's like, okay, I'm going to get one phone number, and I'm going to get 2 phone numbers to track these different campaigns. Maybe if I'm running, radio ads, I'm going to get a different phone number so I can track that. And it can start very, very simple. And if you're watching this, you're an REI BlackBook user, we've got workshops and training videos to show you how to build call tracking systems. It's really not as complicated as it sounds. It is as easy as just, getting a new phone number and using that phone number on XYZ marketing channel, whatever it is. In Don's case, it's just different direct mail campaigns. And
I want to throw in there, I know our BlackBook is a beast, and you can do websites and all kinds of other stuff with it. You want to have a different phone number for your website, right? because you want to know if that lead came from your website. Like everything you do should have a differentiating factor to it that allows you to clearly see what the lead source is. If you send out postcards and you do driving for dollars and you do a website, you don't want to have your cell phone number on all of that because you don't know where your lead generation is coming from. So I just want to tag that in there. And since it's such a robust tool, why not use all the capabilities it has?
Yeah. Call tracking is just one piece, just one way to collect leads and to generate leads and track leads in REI BlackBook. And so again, if you're watching this, I will make sure that we link to some of our trainings where we show you how to build call tracking systems. I can't stress enough how important it is, even if you're if you're just getting started at a small scale, to your point, it's almost like a superpower to know. And it gives you, peace of mind also, I think, knowing that, you can look back and you can see where your marketing dollars are being spent and where they're most effective. Because then, the next quarter, when you go to build your marketing plan for the next quarter or the next year, or however you do that, you can intelligently know, like, I need to stop spending money on, this list because I'm generating leads, but no deals have come from it. Or on the other side, like, I need to spend more money on this list because every time we generate leads, we're having great conversations or leading to appointments and we're closing deals.
Mm-hmm. Or, again, having a great CRM and tracking what you're doing, you may be able to see that, maybe it's not your marketing that's broken. Maybe it's something that happens after the phone rings and you got to hold your team accountable and do a little more training because their performance isn't hitting the data points that it would normally hit or has hit in the past. Maybe they've slacked off a little bit or, it shows you opportunities in your business beyond just marketing. It shows you opportunities for development and training. Maybe you need another team member, maybe your team's overworked. There's a lot of things that it will show you by having that information.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, Don, thanks again, man. I really appreciate you joining us. If anybody's listening here and they want to learn more about you, they want to follow you online. I know you got a great podcast, got a great YouTube channel. Where should we send people to connect with you and learn more about you?
Well, you can find me at the Flip Talk podcast. I'm going to say a slow Flip Talk. It is a tongue twister. There's actually two of them out there in the Flip Talk universe. There is the original podcast where I talk to wonderful people. And then we have the Rookie Playbook, which is a series that me and a buddy did. Oh, it's been out for a couple of years, but it starts with week one. I got this crazy idea to be a real estate investor. Where do I go? It's free. There's no pitch on it. It's out there. And yeah, I'm on Instagram at the real Don Costa. You can always email me at don@fliptalk.com. So, and I'm excited. I know I've been talking with the REI BlackBook team. I've been doing a lot more stuff with you guys, helping educate the REI BlackBook community on some stuff. So you can look for me here in the future. I definitely want to. I got some stuff, some systems and processes on direct mail and some other marketing that I definitely looking forward to diving into with you guys as well.
Love it. Yeah. Well, Don, thanks again, man. Have yourself a great day and we'll see you around.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So I hope you got a ton of value out of that interview. I really enjoyed that conversation. And on the call, Don talked about the importance of tracking your leads and having a system for following up with those leads, right? He talked about the marketing that you do today is going to create deals for you 3 months, 6 months down the road. And the only way to really capture all the value out of the marketing that you're doing and the money that you're spending on marketing is to have systems in place for tracking your leads and following up with your leads. And there's no better tool on the market than REI BlackBook to help you do that. So if you want to check out REI BlackBook, right now you can sign up for a free 14-day trial, completely unrestricted, which means you can get in and you can use every part of the tool. You can set up a phone number, you can track your leads, you can even upload a list of your current cold leads and put it on a follow-up campaign, and you can actually start engaging with those cold leads today. So if you like this interview, be sure to hit the like button below and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you get notified every time we release a new video just like this. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.